Gwen is the main character of Across the Spider-Verse. That's what justifies the cliffhanger, what justifies the amount of screen time she gets, and why I had to find out exactly how it was written. At this point, I've seen Across the Spider-Verse 4 times now and spent at least 2 weeks analyzing it, and I'm making this video for a couple of reasons. One, I have a friend who said he was very disappointed when he watched the movie and didn't expect the cliffhanger, which I didn't agree with. And also, I saw a thread on Twitter that questioned why there was so much Gwen in this movie and that some people didn't enjoy it, which of course I thought was a contentious take. I was like, most people are satisfied though. So what is it about this movie? What is it about Gwen being so prominent that actually makes this movie great? Because for as many people as there are that maybe didn't like her amount of screen time, there's definitely 100 times more that cried in the scene where she's talking to her dad at the end. The main question here is how does Across the Spider-Verse take a love interest side character in the first movie and make them the main character of this movie? And the second question is why? Now, the second question is easier to answer. It's basically a short. In fact, you might have come here from one, so you understand this very much. I think the reason is this movie is trying not to suffer from what I'll call sequel drag, which is what happens with a sequel mostly because it's trying to achieve essentially what the first movie did, but with the problem of the fact that as an audience, we've already seen that first movie, and so seeing it again feels repetitive. Now, what do we usually see in the first movie? In the first movie, the hero is chosen and enters an unfamiliar world. They confront a powerful evil, initially trying to overcome it alone but failing. They likely seek mentorship to harness their unique abilities and fulfill their destiny. Following a journey of spiritual and maybe physical enlightenment or achievement, they learn to wield their powers effectively and ultimately defeat the evil, emerging as the hero of the story. This is a basic rundown of most stories, and when you make it a chart or framework, it's something called the hero's journey. Now, there's really no problem with rehashing this for one sequel. Spider-Man 2 does this very well. So does The Dark Knight. The problem is what happens when you want to do a trilogy, because there's only so many times you can see a hero rise and fall and struggle with their identity and how that affects their strengths and weaknesses before it gets boring and repetitive. See Thor 4 for references. That's also one of the problems with Spider-Man 3 and why Christopher Nolan initially didn't want to make The Dark Knight Rises. He thought 2 movies would suffice. And why the Tom Holland trilogy almost didn't work. I say almost because they managed to pull a few parachutes that saved it, and as the writers of Across the Spider-Verse definitely saw that movie, they probably took it and said, hey, let's evolve the model of making great trilogies with this movie. First of all, how do we solve the problem of repetition and how that gets boring? Well, if the second movie isn't about the rise and fall of our main hero again, and it's actually about another character, a side character from the first movie, okay, that might work. So that's idea and tip number 1. What if it's not just about the main character again? Without the Gwen plot taking center stage, this movie is essentially Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man is doing great, and then his identity as Spider-Man is questioned by a mentor turned antagonist, and then he has to regain faith in himself and stop that antagonist, most likely also ending in the self-destruction of the villain himself. Now, that last part about the villain's self-destruction I wrote on vibes, but comment below if you think Miguel or Spot bite the dust in Beyond the Spider-Verse. Let's see if our predictions come true. Spot is so OP that I'm like, how do you not off this guy in the next movie? So how can we do this? Well, that's where being a good writer and storyteller comes in handy in the first place. It will be way harder to create a movie about a side character that no one knows about and didn't care about the first time, but because they did their due diligence with writing Gwen in the first movie, it was no doubt a lot easier. She wasn't just a two-dimensional girl boss Spider-Man and potential love interest. She had her own backstory that was properly fleshed out and directly related to the theme of the movie. She also functions as a sort of mentor to Miles, the main character, so there was already so much stuff to go off of. She has a traumatic past with it, that of her friend. She wears her art in her costume. You can see it with her choosing to wear ballet shoes, which might be impractical but gives her character more flair. When she's advising Miles, she says,
"Can you swing and flip with the grace of a trained dancer?"
And that really shows how she thinks about being a spider person. She's a love interest, but with a reason as well. Miles isn't just a charming boy she's infatuated with. His youthfulness is endearing to her. She had to grow up quickly due to trauma and pressure, so his youth and optimism offers a refreshing contrast. She admires her as an inspiration, someone experienced and confident and closer to adulthood, so the attraction is rooted in concrete reasons. They need each other for utilitarian as well as selfless purposes. With all that set up, you can move on to supporting these writing and filmmaking analysis videos by becoming a channel member or leaving a donation via the link to our Buy Me a Coffee account in the description. And with all that set up, you can move on to step 2, using the character. Okay, but first, how is Gwen the main character? That's a bold claim, isn't it? Well, if you didn't notice, Miles' story in this movie is Miles versus Miguel and Spot in the quest to save his dad. Why does that matter? Well, because you can essentially break down a story, especially one like this, as A wants B but can't get B because of C. Hence, let's see how A will overcome C to get B. In this situation, Miles is A and his B's are being with his friends, catching Spot, defeating Miguel, and or earning his respect, and saving his father. And by the end, you can even add in escaping the Prowler and getting back to his world. All of which by the end he achieves none of, hence the cliffhanger. But cliffhangers are a problem. They can easily make stories unsatisfying, and that's a very important thing for a story, especially one that wants to be financially successful, to do. It has to be satisfying. So to offset this, you have to actually create an arc that is satisfying, which is why we have Gwen in this movie, which is why this scene with her dad is so big. It's why it's treated as the actual climax of the movie and animated as intensely as an action scene, because that is the main story of this movie. So the movie is still A wants B but can't get B because of C, except in this case Gwen is A. She wants to be reunited with her father. She doesn't want to feel so alone. She wants to start a band of her own. She wants to be able to let go of her guilt. She wants to be able to do her job as a spider person properly. Those are all her B's, but she can't do any of it because, well, her father wants to arrest her, because she believes what Miguel has told her about the Spiderverse and canon events, because she believes Miles is a dangerous anomaly and is wary of the fate of Gwen Stacy's, and because it's very hard to achieve all these things when your guilt is weighing you down anyway. And this all came from step 2 being using the character we have been given. A girl who's in love with music, is facing the guilt of causing her best friend's death, and the strained relationship between her father and loved ones that we got in the first movie. But also a girl who is maybe slipping into falling for Miles and then ramping it up by giving her her own hero's journey. So she has this great power. She's thrust into the world where her father and her last familiar connection is taken away from her, and then she's thrust into further loneliness by her understanding of the canon and has to claw her way back into sanity to defeat all of these. And the real way to do that is to eventually go back and confront / talk to her dad. Now the interesting thing is how roundabout the story handles it. One thing you take away is that it doesn't let the character just want things in the story for no good reason. It links them to causality. At the start of this movie, Gwen doesn't tell her father about her past because Peter died in her arms. That strains their relationship. So when he pulls a gun on her, it's because of that strange relationship. He feels betrayed, and so now she wants to go far away into the unknown. And because she looks up to Jessica Drew as a mentor, because she admires her as a symbol of strong and put together femininity with the ability to actually balance connections with other people, I mean, she's literally a pregnant married superhero, and it seems to be going well. She decides to follow Jess, but Jess, despite being a mentor, comes across as hypocritical and fails to provide Gwen with the actual support she needs. Gwen is still lonely, and so because of that, she's drawn to Miles because of their unique connection, even though it's not advisable because he's an anomaly. However, she decides to see him anyway, and later on Gwen begins to view Miles as a potential threat to the multiverse, but her connection with him is more important than Miguel's warning. So eventually she challenges Miguel and then gets sent back to her world. Note this, she doesn't return home to talk to her dad, but to retrieve a picture of her and Miles, highlighting the significance of their connection in this story, which I think is also an interesting story detail, because it also mirrors how Miles is always drawing pictures of her, the symbolism of pictures in this story. Anyway, Gwen's return home results in a confrontation with her father, who is awakened by her presence. The conversation reaches a turning point when her father announces his resignation. This moment immediately shatters Gwen's previous beliefs about the spider person she should be, and makes her realize that she wants to prioritize her family and friends, just as her father has just now taught her, her father being a main guiding light and the main antagonist to her story in this particular movie, which eventually, in an interesting role reversal, makes Miles her mentor in this story, which actually is so clear because the singing scene shows that she didn't have much to teach him anymore, and that she was the one who was more lost and conflicted, and that she was wrong when she said,
"Don't trust me on that."
Even though we totally respected her flawed opinion on the issue, because in the last movie she was the mentor. But now, because she has this clarity and Hobie has built watches for the dimensional travel, she can now go after Miles with all her heart, completing her arc in this movie from this conflicted, spider cop type person to now being a free thinker and being able to actually go out and protect people that she loves. This is almost funny because it's like they were like, what's a sneaky way to give us a Spider-Woman story? How do you sell tickets to a Spider-Woman movie? And apparently what you do is you call the movies Spider-Man. That's 2023, people. I'm still working on the fatherhood analysis video, and I thought that they should do this one first because it would really help a lot in making the fatherhood video, regardless of how many views this gets. I hope you all care about Gwen, but hey. And yes, it is looking a lot clearer, and I will see you very soon.